if you're considering divorce or are getting divorced. A recent judgment by Judge Pieter Bezuidenhout that underscored the importance of a wife's commitment and sacrifice during marriage, basically rejecting the notion that her former husband was entitled to retain his wealth independently after their split. The ruling came from a marriage that had been concluded in community of property without accrual. Let's bring in legal analyst now, Nonhlanhla Mtshali, to talk more about this. Nonhlanhla, we appreciate your time on this public holiday. So the court basically here recognizing the wife's devotion and sacrifice during the marriage. How is that defined and measured in law?
Well, it's actually quite difficult to try and quantify, because when we look at the facts or the merits of this case, it's very obvious. The wife was a stay-at-home mom. She tended to caring for her children, facilitating their day-to-day needs. The husband is the one who had more financial muscle or better strength, so he brought in monetary value into the contribution and upkeep of the family. So it is quite difficult to say, because you've been a wife for X amounts of years, this is how much that is worth. But what the court looked at instead was the net assets of the husband, and then they ordered a division of their property according to the value of the assets. So it is a difficult position, and it does put women specifically at a disadvantage who choose to neglect their own career and tend to their family's affairs and looking after their children. And it's very regrettable that you can't really put a monetary value to that.
And how does this outcome from the court compare or contrast, if you will, with the fact that this marriage that we're discussing had basically been concluded in community of property without accrual? Does it contradict in any way the agreement that they had signed upon getting married?
Okay, just a point of correction there. The marriage is a marriage out of community of property. So when we
My apologies, you're right. Yes, apologies. I got that wrong.
No problem. So if it's in community of property, it's a 50-50 split. If it's out of community of property, we then have the accrual system that comes into play. With this specific marriage, what we know is that it was out of community of property without the accrual, meaning each individual in the marriage keeps their own assets. And that's how they had it intended to structure. So ordinarily, the principles of family tell us that when a marriage is out of community of property without the accrual, each individual in that marriage walks away in the event of a divorce with their own assets. So it is an obvious deviation from what you would see from their matrimonial property system, but the court did look at the facts. So the fact that the parties are married out of community of property without the accrual isn't necessarily a guarantee that in the event that the parties to those marriages would split, each party walks away with what belongs to them. I think what is important here, and what is a gain or a benefit specifically for women who often make many sacrifices, which include neglecting their own careers, is that there was consideration to that, and there was an instruction or an order from the court that the husband splits his net assets, 40% go to the wife, and then the 60% remain with him.
What does it mean then for other stay-at-home spouses, any other stay-at-home spouse who may have entered into a marriage around or the same terms? Is it a game changer for them as well? Can this be used for them to lay claim, for example, to the estate of a partner who simply isn't willing to share voluntarily?
Yes, it is. Obviously, the merits of the matter would matter. Specifically, in this case, we know that the wife was unemployed. In an instance where a spouse is employed, that means that they still have a prospect to earn income, or they can actually at least sustain themselves. In this case, you have a woman who is married for a 30-year period, and she had obviously neglected her career, and her prospect also of being able to secure employment are somewhat lower than what you would ordinarily find. So it is an indication that for spouses who are married in a community of property, specifically women who are financially dependent on their husband, it does set precedent, and it's not the first case that we see that deviates from the principles of when parties are married out of community of property with the accrual, each party keeps their own assets. I think it's what the public can learn from this decision is that even if you're married out of community of property without the accrual system applicable in your marriage, it's not a complete guarantee that at divorce, you and your spouse's, your assets, in other words, will be regarded as independent. Put simply, what's yours is yours and what mine is mine might not necessarily be the case, specifically if we look in cases or facts where a woman is a caregiver and the husband is the one who provides financially.
And lastly, from what I was reading, so the husband had basically promised that he would be the provider financially during the term of the marriage. How big of a factor is that? And would you encourage, for example, people who go into a marriage where one will be staying at home while the one is basically gathering the means by which they survive, to have that in writing explicitly stated to avoid a case such as this?
Yes, you can have it in writing, but I think even if it's not in writing, we have to look at the reality of what a partner faces. If you're the one who tends to the needs of the children, you know, you fetch them from school, you drop them off, you're involved in the extramural activities, those are things that you can already prove, because you can present documentation to the court, for instance, if your children have extramarital activities. So I wouldn't necessarily think in the absence of the writing, you can't prove that you were a parent who took care of the family and took care of the needs of the children. But even if it is something that is there, it does speak to the fact that it is reassurance from the husband giving their wife to say, you need not work, I will fend for the family, and then you can take care of the day-to-day affairs of the household.
Good to speak to you, Nonhlanhla Mtshali. We appreciate your time on SABC News tonight. Thank you.